"She's not dead. She's not dead. She's alive." The words slipped from Delight Rollins before fear could smother them. They were small words, almost fragile, but in the towering glass atrium where silence had been curated like a luxury, they hit with the force of a fault line cracking open. Before we continue with this story, I want to sincerely welcome you to my channel and say thanks for joining this beautiful family. Let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like and share this video to someone, and leave a comment about what you think of today's story. Now, back to the story. First, no one moved. Rows of black-clad executives and polished mourners turned only their eyes, as if their bodies refused to follow a child's madness. The holographic memorial of Jenny Smart, 30 feet tall and rendered in flawless luminescent white, flickered once behind the dais, a subtle glitch like a shiver passing through code. No one dared speak. No one dared breathe wrong. Delight stood near the back, hands trembling, her voice still echoing in her bones. She was too young to understand the choreography of grief, too earnest to know that disrupting a funeral, this funeral, was a kind of heresy no adult in that room would ever forgive. But children don't measure consequence. They only measure truth. And the truth had been clawing at her chest since the moment the memorial began. One of the board members, a man whose suit cost more than most apartments, shifted in his seat. Someone else stifled a gasp. Near the aisle, a woman's fingers curled around the armrest as though steadying herself against an invisible drop. Security hesitated at the edges of the hall, waiting for an order that hadn't yet been spoken. Delight didn't flinch under the weight of their disbelief. Her eyes never left the hologram. The tremor in her throat had faded, replaced by something steadier, an instinct she couldn't name but refused to betray. Somewhere beyond the hush and the polished eulogies, she had seen what no one wanted to see. And somewhere, whether above them, beneath them, or just beyond the reach of sanctioned mourning, Jenny Smart was not as gone as the world had decided she should be. Long before Delight Rollins found the courage to speak her tiny rebellion into that cathedral of power, the world had already begun rehearsing Jenny Smart's death. They mourned her as a visionary, a martyr of innovation, a woman too brilliant to be anything but tragic in the end. But public grief is rarely about the dead. It is about the story the living need to believe. And the story they crafted for Jenny was clean, convenient, and exquisitely sealed. What no one in that atrium understood, not the executives, not the mourners, not the empire built on her name, was that Jenny Smart had felt herself disappearing long before anyone declared her gone. Long before the tributes and the black silk programs, something beneath her legacy had begun to rot. And if you want to understand why a child would shatter a funeral with a whisper, you have to start with the moment Jenny realized that the company she built was already digging her grave. The memory came to Delight like light through water, fractured but unmistakable. 6 months ago, before the accident, before the eulogies and the black-draped towers, she had been nobody. Just another kid from the east side, where Omnicorp's shadow fell longest and darkest. The STEM program was supposed to be a photo opportunity, nothing more. 20 carefully selected students, scrubbed clean and coached on gratitude, paraded through the executive floors for exactly 45 minutes of corporate benevolence. But Jenny Smart had broken the script. Delight remembered the precise moment. Standing in line with the others, watching this woman in a suit that probably cost more than her mother made in a year, and expecting the kind of practiced smile adults wore when they were counting down minutes. Instead, Jenny had stopped. Really stopped. Her eyes, not the camera-ready version but something rawer, had found Delight at the back of the group. "You're observing," Jenny had said. Not a question but recognition. "The others are performing, but you're watching the spaces between things." Before Delight could respond, before the handlers could redirect the schedule, Jenny had done something unprecedented. She'd taken Delight's hand and led her away from the group, down a corridor that security later said didn't exist on any blueprint. The room Jenny showed her was small, almost forgotten, a workshop that predated the tower's renovation. And there, among obsolete circuit boards and half-finished prototypes, Jenny had pulled out the orb. "This was my first real creation," she'd said, placing it in Delight's palm. The sphere was warm, almost alive, its surface shifting between transparency and opacity like breathing glass. Before the empire, before the board meetings and the quarterly projections. When I still believed technology could be intimate. The orb had pulsed once, gently, and Jenny's expression had shifted to something Delight couldn't name then but understood now. Fear wrapped in hope. "Keep this safe," Jenny had whispered, her fingers closing over Delight's. "If something happens to me, when something happens, you'll know how to use it. You see the special lights, don't you? The ones adults pretend aren't there." Delight had nodded, not understanding but believing, because Jenny Smart had looked at her like she mattered, like she was more than a tax write-off in sneakers. "Good," Jenny had said. "Then you'll see me when others can't." Now, as security's hands closed around her shoulders, firm but confused, as if handling a problem that hadn't been outlined in their protocols, Delight clutched that same orb beneath her jacket. It was burning now, not with heat but with certainty. "She's not dead." The words tore from her again as they led her toward the exit. "I can prove it. The orb she gave me. That's enough." The voice belonged to Marcus Thorne, and it cut through the atrium like surgical steel. He hadn't raised his voice. Marcus never needed to, but the temperature seemed to drop wherever his attention landed. "Please escort Miss Rollins to the meditation room. She's clearly overwhelmed by grief." The way he said grief made it sound like a diagnosis. 2 security officers flanked her now, their movements coordinated but hesitant. One of them, badge-reading Harrison, kept glancing at his supervisor near the stage. The other wouldn't meet her eyes at all. "You don't understand," Delight said, her voice smaller now but unbroken. "She knew this would happen. She told me. Children process loss differently." Marcus announced to the room, his tone a masterclass in manufactured sympathy. "We should all be understanding of Miss Rollins' pain. Jenny would want us to show compassion." The mourners relaxed into this narrative. A troubled child, overcome by the loss of a mentor. Heads nodded. Tissues emerged. The disruption was already being rewritten as something poignant, controllable. But David Chun wasn't nodding. From his position near the security station, Omnicorp's head of security watched the scene with the kind of stillness that preceded either acceptance or action. Chun had learned that stillness in places where movement meant death, where observation was survival's first currency. Jenny had hired him personally 5 years ago, pulling him from a military intelligence unit that officially didn't exist, because she'd said she needed someone who could see threats that hadn't formed yet. Now he watched Marcus orchestrate the room's emotions with the precision of a conductor, and felt the familiar prickle at the base of his skull. The one that had saved his life in Kandahar, in Seoul, in a dozen classified locations that still visited his dreams. The girl was being led past his station now. As she passed, the security monitors flickered, a barely perceptible distortion that wouldn't show up on the recordings. But Chun saw it. More importantly, he saw the object she was clutching beneath her jacket, the way it seemed to bend the light around it. He'd seen that distortion once before, 3 days ago, on the security footage from Jenny's office, 20 minutes before her death was reported. The footage that had mysteriously corrupted. The footage that Marcus had personally assured him was irrelevant. Chen's hand moved to his tablet, pulling up the entrance logs from this morning. Delight Rollins, age 11, no invitation, no registered guardian. She'd simply appeared at the security checkpoint holding that orb, and the scanners had accepted her. Not flagged, not questioned. Accepted, as if the building's entire security system recognized her as someone who belonged. That wasn't possible. Chun had designed those protocols himself. Unless Jenny had built in exceptions he didn't know about. Unless Jenny had been preparing for something. 3 floors up, in an office that didn't appear on public directories, Marcus Thorne stood at a window that could darken to opacity with a thought. His inner circle, 2 board members and the chief technology officer, waited while he watched the dispersing mourners below. "A child?" Richards ventured, his nervous laugh like coins rattling in a cup. "Just a disturbed child." Marcus didn't turn. That disturbed child was holding one of Jenny's prototypes. The room sharpened. The fail-safe devices were all destroyed, the CTO said quickly. I oversaw it personally. Every unit accounted for. Clearly not every unit. Marcus's reflection in the darkened glass showed nothing. Not anger, not concern, just the calculating patience of a man who had spent 2 years planning a coup that should have been flawless. Jenny gave that girl something. Something she kept off the books. He finally turned, and his associates instinctively stepped back. Marcus Thorne had the kind of face that photographed well, sharp, symmetrical, forgettable in its perfection. But in person, in moments like this, there was something wrong with the proportions, as if he'd been assembled from parts that didn't quite match. Double the security on sublevel 7, he said, and find out everything about that girl. Family, medical history, every interaction she's ever had with Jenny. Sir, Richard said carefully, if we move too aggressively, it might raise questions. Questions are already being raised. Marcus moved to his desk, fingers dancing across a holographic interface only he could see. Chun is getting curious. I can see it in his procedures, the way he's routing his queries. We may need to accelerate the timeline. The CTO paled. The consciousness transfer isn't complete. If we don't rush, Marcus cut him off. That child might activate something Jenny left behind, something that could expose everything. Through the office's smart glass, the city stretched out like a circuit board, 10 million lights that Omnicorp controlled directly or indirectly. Marcus had been patient. He'd been thorough. He'd orchestrated Jenny's disappearance with the kind of precision that should have been absolute. But now a child with an impossible orb had spoken an impossible truth. And somewhere in the building's quantum servers, in spaces between spaces that shouldn't exist, something that had once been Jenny Smart was beginning to wake up. David Chun made his decision standing in an elevator that shouldn't have existed. Service Tunnel 7. Accessible only through a maintenance code Jenny had given him 3 years ago, for emergencies that haven't happened yet. He was going to find Delight Rollins. He was going to find out what Jenny had really been preparing for. And he was going to discover why a child's desperate claim felt more truthful than anything Marcus Thorne had said in the last 72 hours. The elevator descended past floors that weren't numbered, into the spaces Omnicorp didn't acknowledge, where Jenny Smart might have hidden more than just prototypes, where she might have hidden herself. Marcus Thorne had perfected the art of manufacturing truth. Standing before 47 cameras in Omnicorp's press amphitheater, he wore grief like a designer suit, tailored, expensive, and utterly convincing. The lights caught the silver at his temples, precisely dyed to suggest wisdom without decay, as he delivered words that had been focus grouped, algorithm tested, and psychologically calibrated for maximum emotional impact. Jenny Smart was more than our CEO, he said, his voice carrying the exact tremor that suggested barely contained emotion. She was our North Star, and while we mourn her loss, we must honor her vision by continuing forward. She would want nothing less. The reporters, most of them on Omnicorp's indirect payroll through advertising dependencies, recorded every word without question. The story was already written. Tragic accident, heroic legacy, smooth transition. The child's outburst at the funeral had been edited down to a footnote, when mentioned at all. A young girl, overcome by grief, reminded us all how deeply Jenny touched lives across every economic stratum. Clean, controlled, complete. But in his peripheral vision, Marcus caught the ghost of a glitch on Monitor 7, a flicker that shouldn't exist in a system he personally oversaw. He didn't react. Marcus Thorne never reacted in public. But his fingers found the hidden switch in his podium, sending a coded pulse to security. Asterisk full sweep. Now. Asterisk. 20 minutes later, in a room that existed in no architectural plans, Marcus stood before a wall of quantum processors that hummed at frequencies only certain insects could hear. The air here was kept at exactly 61.3 degrees Fahrenheit, the optimal temperature for the kind of consciousness transfer that shouldn't be possible for another decade. Status, he said to the empty room. The response came through bone conduction, a voice that seemed to originate inside his skull. 73% contained. Subject shows signs of resistance. Accelerate the process. That risks permanent fragmentation, I said accelerate. Marcus's hand pressed against a biometric panel that read more than fingerprints. It sampled DNA, analyzed microbiome, measured electrical field. The kind of security Jenny had invented, never knowing it would cage her. And the girl, under surveillance. Chun made contact 17 minutes ago. Marcus felt the first genuine emotion he'd experienced in years. A cold satisfaction that bordered on pleasure. Good. Let them think they're being clever. It makes the next steps easier. He opened an encrypted channel, one that bounced through 7 satellites and 3 quantum relays before reaching its destination. The face that appeared on his private screen had no name in any database, belonged to no corporation that officially existed. The timeline holds, Marcus reported. Jenny's consciousness will be fully mapped within 48 hours. After that, we can extract what we need and dispose of the rest. And if the child's device activates the failsafe, then we'll have 2 consciousnesses to harvest instead of 1. Marcus's smile was a thing of practiced angles. Children's minds are remarkably malleable. 3 miles away, in a bedroom that smelled of lavender and worry, Delight Rollins sat cross-legged on a quilt her grandmother had made before algorithms determined the patterns of everything. The orb rested in her palms, warm and patient, like a cat that knew exactly when it would be fed. Her guardian, Aunt Sarah, who wasn't really an aunt but had been her mother's friend before the cancer, had given up trying to convince her it was just grief. Sarah was in the kitchen now, making calls to therapists that Omnicorp's insurance would mysteriously decline to cover. I know you're there, Delight whispered to the orb. Jenny, I know you can hear me. The sphere pulsed once, so subtle that anyone watching would dismiss it as a trick of the light. But Delight had spent 6 months learning Jenny's secret language, the one hidden in quantum fluctuations and probability waves. Remember the game, Jenny had said during one of their sessions. When everyone tells you what's real, close your eyes and count the possibilities instead. Delight closed her eyes, counted. 1. Jenny was dead, and this was grief. 2. Jenny was alive somewhere, somehow. 3. Jenny was neither dead nor alive, but something in between. The orb grew warmer at the 3rd count. A soft knock at her window made her eyes snap open. Not the door, the window. 3rd floor, no fire escape, nothing but a 30-foot drop to concrete. David Chun hung there like gravity was optional, secured by a military-grade adhesion rig that wouldn't officially exist for another 5 years. His expression through the glass was carefully neutral, but his eyes, those missed nothing. Delight didn't scream, didn't panic. 6 months with Jenny had taught her that impossible things were just puzzles waiting for the right perspective. She opened the window. You believe me, she said. Not a question. I believe something's wrong, Chun corrected, sliding inside with economy of movement that made cats look clumsy. The security footage from Jenny's office. The biological readings that don't match. The way Marcus had answers before anyone asked questions. He paused, studying her with the kind of attention that had kept him alive in places where trust was lethal. And I believe Jenny gave you that device for a reason. Delight held out the orb. She said I'd know how to use it when the time came, but all it does is get warm and pulse. Chen's analytical mind was already cataloging. Surface temperature variations, electromagnetic signatures, quantum entanglement patterns that shouldn't be visible to the naked eye but somehow were. May I? She handed it over reluctantly. The moment it left her hands, the orb went dark. Not just unpowered but somehow less real, as if it existed more fully when she held it. Interesting. Chun returned it immediately, watching it restore itself in her grasp. It's keyed to you. Specifically to you. His eyes narrowed. What exactly did Jenny teach you in those sessions? Games mostly. Pattern recognition. Probability counting. She said I had a gift for seeing between things. Between things, Chun repeated slowly. Then, with sudden understanding, quantum superposition. She was teaching you to perceive quantum states without collapsing them into classical observations. Delight looked at him blankly. She was teaching you to see multiple realities at once, he simplified, though his mind was racing through implications that violated several laws of physics. The orb, it's not just a device. It's an interface. And you're the only one who can operate it. But interface to what? Before Chun could answer, the orb flared. Not with light, but with something that made both their shadows dance in directions that didn't match any light source in the room. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Delight could have sworn she saw another shadow among theirs. A familiar silhouette that shouldn't exist. To her, Chun breathed, understanding flooding his features. Jenny didn't just prepare for her death. She prepared to survive it. The orb pulsed again, stronger this time, and suddenly Delight could feel something like Morse code thrumming through her palms. Not random, patterned. Deliberate. She's trying to tell us something? Delight said, closing her eyes to focus on the sensation. Numbers, no coordinates. Inside Omnicorp. Sub-level. She frowned, concentrating. Sub-level 12? But the building only has 10 sub-levels. Chen's expression went very still. According to public records, yes. But I've always wondered why the freight elevator panels have space for more buttons. He pulled out a device that looked like a phone but hummed with capabilities that wouldn't be commercial for decades. The patterns she's sending, can you replicate them? Delight moved her fingers across the orb's surface, following the invisible guidance she felt rather than saw. The device in Chen's hand lit up with data streams that shouldn't exist. Architectural plans that had been deleted, access codes that had been destroyed, pathways through Omnicorp that Marcus Thorne didn't know existed. She built a parallel infrastructure, Chun said, voice tight with awe and urgency, hidden inside the visible one. And she's still in there, somewhere between digital and physical, waiting for. He looked at Delight. Waiting for you. Then we have to go get her. It's not that simple. Marcus has the building under complete surveillance. The moment we try to access those levels, he'll know, Delight finished. Then, with a child's clarity that cut through adult complications. Unless we're supposed to be there. Unless we have a reason he can't question. Chun raised an eyebrow. Delight smiled, the first real smile since the funeral. You're head of security. You detected an anomaly in sub-level 12. And you're bringing Jenny's favorite student to help identify whether it's connected to her work, as part of the proper transition protocol. That's actually believable. Chen's respect for the child grew. But Marcus will assign escorts. We'll be watched every moment. Good, Delight said, the orb pulsing in rhythm with her confidence. Let him watch. Jenny taught me that the best magic tricks happen in plain sight. As if in response, the orb projected something neither of them expected. A date and time, floating in the air like a promise. Tomorrow.
3:33 nachts.
The exact time, Chun realized with a chill that Jenny Smart had been declared dead. She's giving us a deadline, he said. Or a resurrection, Delight countered. And for the first time since that terrible night, David Chun allowed himself to believe that perhaps the child who had shattered a funeral with hope might actually be right. Somewhere in Omnicorp's towers, Marcus Thorne watched their conversation through feeds they didn't know existed, and smiled. They thought they were being clever. They thought they were saving Jenny. They had no idea they were walking into the exact trap he'd designed. After all, the best way to catch both the original and the backup was to let them find each other. At 3:27 a.m., Omnicorp Tower was a different creature entirely. The building that hummed with 10,000 lives during daylight hours now breathed with the slower rhythm of maintenance protocols and security sweeps. Emergency lighting painted corridors in amber and shadow, transforming familiar spaces into something liminal, uncertain. David Chun knew these hours intimately. They were when the building revealed its true architecture, the skeleton beneath the corporate skin. The coordinates aren't matching any floor plan, he murmured, studying his modified scanner as they descended in a service elevator that required 3 separate biometric confirmations to access. Beside him, Delight clutched the orb, its surface rippling with patterns that looked almost like heartbeats rendered in light. That's because we're not looking for a place, Delight said, her voice steady despite the hour, despite the weight of what they were attempting. We're looking for a between place. Jenny called them probability pockets. spaces that exist in the overlap of architectural intentions. Chun looked at her sharply. That's not possible. Architecture doesn't work that way. Architecture doesn't, Delight agreed. But quantum architecture does. The elevator shuddered to a stop at sublevel 10. Officially the lowest point of the building. But Delight was already moving, her hand guided by the warming orb toward what appeared to be a maintenance panel. She pressed her palm against it, and the orb pulsed once, twice, 3 times in a pattern Chun recognized from his military days. SOS in a frequency only certain equipment could detect. The wall responded. Not opening, shifting star. Like watching reality admit it had been lying about its configuration. Where solid steel had been, there was now a corridor that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, but undeniably did. Quantum superposition, Chun breathed, understanding flooding through him. Jenny built spaces that exist in multiple states simultaneously. They're only here when observed by the right observer. Or the right key, Delight said, holding up the orb, which was now glowing steadily, pulling them forward like a compass that measured intention rather than magnetism. They moved through the impossible corridor, their footsteps echoing in ways that suggested the space was simultaneously vast and confined. The walls were lined with something that might have been circuitry or might have been organic. In the orb's light, the distinction seemed irrelevant. Chen's security protocols screamed warnings in his head, but his instincts, honed in places where reality was negotiable, told him to trust the child. The corridor ended at a door that wasn't a door. It was more like a membrane, translucent and breathing. Through it, they could see light that pulsed in rhythm with Delight's orb. "She's in there," Delight whispered, and Chun heard not hope but certainty. They passed through the membrane, it felt like walking through thought itself, and entered a chamber that belonged in no building ever approved by any safety board. The space was circular, perhaps 50 feet in diameter, with walls that curved up into darkness. Every surface was covered in what Chen first thought was elaborate decoration but quickly recognized as functional. Billions of microprocessors, quantum transmitters, biological interface nodes that blurred the line between technology and organism. The air itself seemed alive with data, streams of information visible as gossamer threads of light that connected to a central structure. And there, at the heart of it all, was the truth they'd come to find. The casket from the funeral had been theater, Chun realized. Prop designed to sell a lie. This was the reality. Jenny Smart lay suspended in a crystalline pod that was part medical equipment, part quantum computer, part something that had no name because she'd probably invented it herself. Tubes and wires connected to her body, but they weren't just maintaining life, they were maintaining something more complex. Her vital signs, displayed on surfaces that materialized when observed, showed patterns that weren't quite human anymore. Brain activity that spiked in impossible directions. Heart rhythms that seemed to be keeping time with the building's power grid itself. She was alive. Unconscious, transformed, suspended between states, but absolutely undeniably alive. "My God," Chin whispered, moving closer to the pod. His trained eye cataloged the machinery, modified consciousness transfer equipment, neural mapping arrays, quantum entanglement generators. "This isn't just life support. It's integration," Delight finished, her young voice carrying understanding that should have been impossible. "She's merged with the building's systems. That's why the orb works. She's not in her body anymore. Not completely. She's distributed through Omnicorp's entire network." Chen's hands flew over the control surfaces, his security clearance somehow still valid in this space that shouldn't exist. Data flooded his vision, medical records, system logs, command histories. And there, buried in the code like a signature, was the proof they needed. "Marcus has been managing this remotely," he said, voice tight with controlled fury. "Incremental adjustments to her medication, subtle alterations to the life support parameters. He's been slowly, methodically killing her in a way that would look natural to any investigation." He pulled up a timeline, overlaying it with Marcus's access logs. 3 weeks ago, he increased the sedation. 2 weeks ago, he began reducing oxygen flow by 0.3% daily. Yesterday, the day of the funeral, he initiated what he called Final Cascade Protocol. "How long does she have?" Delight asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. At the current rate of deterioration? 18 hours. Maybe less. Delight approached the pod, pressing her small hand against its surface. The orb in her other hand flared, and for a moment, the entire chamber responded. Lights dancing, data streams redirecting, the pod itself seeming to recognize her presence. She knew, Delight said softly. She knew Marcus would do this. That's why she prepared all of this. The orb, the hidden spaces, teaching me to see between things. She looked up at Chen, and in her young eyes was a determination that belonged to someone who'd lived much longer. She turned herself into the failsafe. Chun nodded slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind. She couldn't stop Marcus directly. He'd been planning this too long, had too much control. But she could prepare a way to survive it, to leave evidence, to wait for someone to find her. Delight finished. To wait for us. A new display materialized, showing biological readings Chun had never seen before. Neural activity that extended beyond Jenny's physical brain, spreading through the quantum processors like thoughts becoming infrastructure. She wasn't just unconscious. She was experiencing existence in a way that had no precedent, no manual, no safety protocols. The holographic glitch at the funeral, Chun said suddenly. That was her, wasn't it? Trying to signal through the only system she could still access. Delight nodded, and the orb responded because it's entangled with her consciousness. Every pulse, every warm spot. It's her, trying to communicate through quantum states that most people can't perceive. They stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Jenny Smart, the woman who'd built an empire on the promise of transcending human limitations, had become her own proof of concept. But in doing so, she'd made herself vulnerable to the very person she'd trusted to protect her legacy. We need to document everything, Chun said, his mind shifting into operational mode. Create backups that Marcus can't access or delete. And we need to figure out how to reverse what he's done without. An alarm pierced the chamber. Not loud but wrong. A frequency that made their teeth ache and their vision blur. The displays flickered, showing system warnings in languages that weren't quite human. He knows we're here, Delight said, the orb in her hand suddenly burning cold. Impossible. This space doesn't exist on any monitoring system. No, Delight said, understanding dawning in her voice. But Jenny does, and he's been watching her vital signs. The moment we made contact, the moment she responded to us, the membrane door they'd entered through began to shift, its translucent surface darkening, solidifying. Marcus wasn't just aware of their presence. He was sealing them in. The final protocol, Chen said, checking his equipment with fingers that wanted to tremble but wouldn't. He's accelerating it. If we don't find a way to stop this he checked the readings. 7 minutes, Jenny Smart dies. And based on these containment protocols, we die with her. Delight looked at the pod, at the woman suspended between life and something else, then at the orb in her hand. It was pulsing now in a pattern she recognized, the same pattern Jenny had taught her 6 months ago, disguised as a game about probability and choice. No, she said, with the clarity that comes from understanding exactly what needs to happen. That's what he expects. But Jenny didn't just prepare for her survival. She held the orb up to the pod, and it began to resonate with frequencies that made the air itself seem to crystallize. She prepared for her resurrection. The chamber responded, every surface suddenly alive with possibility, with potential, with the concentrated will of a woman who'd seen her own death coming and decided to architect her way around it. Marcus Thorne had made one crucial error in his perfect plan. He'd assumed Jenny Smart would accept defeat. But Jenny had never accepted anything she didn't design herself. And now, with 7 minutes counting down and her consciousness spread through quantum space like thought becoming reality, she was about to prove that death, like everything else, was just another system waiting to be hacked. Jenny Smart's consciousness flickered through Omnicorp Tower like a ghost made of light and intention. But she was fading. The effort of manifesting, of broadcasting the truth, had cost her more than her distributed existence could sustain. I can't maintain this state, she said, her voice already becoming more echo than substance. The quantum coherence is collapsing. I have maybe 6 hours before I fragment completely. Then we need allies, Chun said, his tactical mind already mapping the human architecture of Omnicorp. People Marcus hasn't corrupted. People who loved you enough to risk everything. Jenny's form shifted, becoming more abstract, more suggestion than presence. Elena Rodriguez. Start with Elena. Then she was gone. Not dead, but dispersed, retreating into the quantum static to preserve what remained of her coherence. Delight stood in the suddenly ordinary chamber, the orb in her hand now pulsing with a different rhythm. Urgent, desperate, alive. Who's Elena Rodriguez? Jenny's personal assistant for 12 years, Chen answered, already moving toward the membrane door that had reformed into an exit. If anyone knows Jenny's secrets beyond the corporate facade, it's her. They found Elena Rodriguez in her office at 4:47 a.m. because Elena Rodriguez hadn't gone home in 3 days. She sat surrounded by 17 monitors, each displaying different aspects of Omnicorp's operations, her fingers dancing across holographic keyboards with the precision of a concert pianist who'd learned to play corporate symphonies. She looked up when they entered. Chun using his security override, Delight small enough to seem like she belonged wherever adults decided she should be, and her expression cycled through surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been hope. Mr. Chun, she said carefully, her voice carrying an accent that suggested Barcelona filtered through decades of Silicon Valley. And Miss Rollins, rather early for a security inspection, isn't it? Chun closed the door, activated a privacy shield that would give them maybe 3 minutes before Marcus's surveillance systems flagged the anomaly. We need to show you something. You're going to think we're insane. You're going to want to call security, which would be me, so that's redundant. But I need you to watch first, react second. He pulled up the recording on his secure device. Not all of it, just enough. Marcus's voice, planning Jenny's murder. The Prometheus Syndicate. The systematic elimination of Omnicorp's loyal executives. Elena's face went through transformations that belonged in medical textbooks about shock. Her hand found the small pendant at her throat. A gift from Jenny, Delight noticed, the same quantum crystal that powered the orb but in decorative form. Dios mío, Elena whispered. Then stronger, I knew it. I knew something was wrong. Jenny never had depression. She never showed signs of the illness Marcus described. And the day before her accident, she gave me this. She pulled up an encrypted file that shouldn't have existed on any corporate system. She said if anything happened to her, I should water the seeds she'd planted. I thought it was metaphorical, but the file opened, revealing names. Dozens of them. Engineers, researchers, board members, external contacts. People Jenny had identified as trustworthy, incorruptible, loyal. It's a resistance network, Chen breathed. She built a resistance network before Marcus even made his move. She always said the best time to prepare for betrayal was before you needed to, Elena said, her fingers already flying across her keyboards. Give me 20 minutes. I can activate the network without triggering any surveillance flags. I designed the communication protocol myself. Marcus never knew it existed because he never bothered to understand how Jenny actually ran things, only how the org chart said she did. While Elena worked, Delight studied the pendant at the woman's throat. It was pulsing in sync with her orb, creating a resonance that felt like conversation without words. There are more of these, she said suddenly. Jenny gave them to people, disguised as jewelry, as desk ornaments, as gifts. They're all connected, aren't they? Elena smiled for the first time. Sharp and dangerous, the expression of someone who'd been underestimated for so long they'd turned it into a weapon. 47 devices, distributed over 2 years. Jenny called it the Constellation Protocol. Each one is quantum entangled with the others. If we activate them simultaneously, we create a network Marcus can't monitor, Chen finished, because it doesn't use any infrastructure he controls. The first response came within minutes. Dr. Sarah Winters, head of biomedical research, who'd been documenting suspicious changes to Jenny's medical protocols for weeks. Then James Park, the forensic accountant who'd been quietly flagging financial irregularities that kept getting buried. Lisa Chin, no relation to David, from legal, who'd noticed contracts being altered posthumously, impossible changes that suggested someone was rewriting reality with corporate authority. Each new ally brought something crucial. Sarah had medical evidence that Jenny's accident was chemically induced. James had traced the money, not just millions but billions, flowing toward Prometheus through channels that violated 17 federal laws. Lisa had been building a legal framework for corporate coup charges that most lawyers didn't even know existed. But it was the last ally who changed everything. Catherine Morse, investigative journalist, winner of 3 Pulitzers, and someone who'd been investigating Omnicorp for 2 years. She appeared on Elena's secure channel looking exhausted but vindicated. "I knew Thorne was dirty," she said without preamble. "But I could never prove it. He was too careful, too connected. But if you have what you claim to have." "We have everything," Chun confirmed. "But we need more than evidence. We need a stage. A moment when Marcus can't spin, can't deny, can't escape." "The shareholders' meeting," Elena said suddenly. Today, technically, 5 p.m. Every major investor, the entire board, and..." She smiled again, that dangerous expression that was becoming familiar. "Marcus is planning to formally accept the CEO position. Is being broadcast globally. Omnicorp's triumph over tragedy." "Perfect," Catherine said. "I can have 3 camera crews there under the pretense of covering the transition. But how do we ensure Marcus doesn't shut everything down the moment he realizes what's happening?" That's when Delight spoke, her young voice cutting through adult complexity with childhood clarity. "We don't let him realize. We make him think he's winning right until the moment he's lost." The adults turned to her, and she held up the orb, which was now pulsing with patterns that looked almost like laughter. "Jenny taught me about misdirection, about how the best magic tricks work. The audience watches the hand you want them to watch, while the real trick happens where they're not looking." She looked at each ally in turn, these adults who'd forgotten that children could be strategic too.
"Marcus thinks I'm nobody."
A disruption he's already handled. He doesn't know about the orb's real capabilities. He doesn't know Jenny's consciousness is still active. And he definitely doesn't know that every Omnicorp device in the building is about to become a broadcast system he can't control. Chen understood first. You want to let him have his moment. Let him stand at that podium, accepting power he's killed to obtain. And then Jenny appears, Delight finished. Not as a ghost, not as a recording, but as herself. Distributed through every screen, every speaker, every photon of light in that room. Alive, aware, and accusing. The plan that formed over the next 3 hours was part corporate espionage, part technological miracle, part theater of the absurd. Each ally took a piece. Elena would ensure the Constellation Protocol was ready, creating an unhackable network for the moment of revelation. Sarah would document Jenny's actual medical state, preparing evidence that would stand up in any court. James would have the financial crimes packaged for immediate transmission to federal authorities. Lisa would have arrest warrants ready, judges on standby. Catherine would ensure the world was watching. And Delight would be the trigger. "I'll need to be in the room," she said. And before anyone could protest about the danger, she continued. "The orb has to be close to Jenny's pod for the consciousness transfer to work. And Marcus won't see me as a threat. I'm just a grieving child who had an outburst at a funeral. Security might watch me, but they won't stop me. Not if I play it right." Chun wanted to refuse, every protective instinct screaming against putting a child in danger. But he'd learned something in his years of security work. The most dangerous person in any room was the one nobody considered a threat. As dawn broke over Omnicorp Tower, painting its glass walls with light that looked like hope, their small resistance finalized their plan. They had 11 hours to save Jenny Smart, expose Marcus Thorne, and prevent the Prometheus Syndicate from consuming one of the last ethical tech companies on Earth. "One more thing," Elena said as they prepared to disperse, to take their positions for the performance of their lives. Jenny left a message. For all of us, but especially for you, Delight. She pulled up a final file, one that materialized in the air like a whisper becoming visible. Jenny's face appeared. Not the distributed consciousness, not the dying body, but Jenny as she'd been before all of this began. Alive, brilliant, and unbroken. If you're watching this, the recording said, then the worst has happened and the best is about to begin. Marcus thought he was playing chess, but chess has rules. What we're playing has something better, it has heart. Delight, my dear one, remember what I taught you. The lights that matter most are the ones nobody else can see. Until they suddenly can't ignore them anymore. The message faded, but its meaning remained. Burning bright in a room full of people who'd found their purpose in the space between corporate death and quantum resurrection. Somewhere in the tower, Marcus Thorne was preparing for his coronation. He had no idea he was actually preparing for his execution. And at the center of it all, an 11-year-old girl with an impossible orb was about to remind the world that power wasn't about who controlled the board. It was about who could flip it entirely. Marcus Thorne stood in his private office at 7:23 a.m., watching the city wake through glass that could turn opaque with a thought. He hadn't slept. Sleep was for people who didn't have empires to steal. The timeline changes, he said to the empty room, though his words were being recorded by quantum encryption and transmitted to Victoria Ash. We execute final termination at 3 p.m. during the shareholders' meeting. That's aggressive, Victoria's voice responded through bone conduction, making Marcus's jaw ache. The original plan didn't account for variables. Marcus pulled up security footage from the funeral, watching Delight Rollins's outburst for the 100th time. Something about it bothered him. Not the words, but the way the building's systems had responded. A flutter in the power grid. A spike in quantum processing. Anomalies that suggested, what? The child knows something. Or Jenny told her something. Either way, she's a loose thread. Then cut it. Not yet. If she disappears now, people will ask questions. After Jenny's final termination, after I'm confirmed as CEO, then we clean house. The child, Chun, anyone else who might have been loyal to Jenny's vision rather than Omnicorp's future. He turned from the window, pulling up David Chen's personnel file. 3 discrepancies in the past 12 hours. Minor. A security door held open 2 seconds longer than necessary. A camera angle adjusted without proper documentation. A presence in sublevel 10 that didn't match any scheduled maintenance. Each one explainable. Together, they formed a pattern that made Marcus's teeth itch. Double Chen's surveillance. He ordered the security AI that thought it was unhackable. I want to know every breath he takes, every thought he thinks, and flag any interaction with the Rollins child. The AI confirmed, not knowing that Elena Rodriguez had built a ghost in its machine 3 years ago, a phantom subroutine that reported Marcus's orders to her hidden network. In her office, Elena received the alert and immediately activated a protocol she'd named Schrodinger's staff, making David Chun exist in multiple places simultaneously within the security system. To any surveillance, he would appear to be following his normal patterns while actually being wherever he needed to be. He's getting paranoid, she messaged through the Constellation protocol. We need to move faster. Chun received the message while standing in a maintenance corridor that didn't appear on any schematic, watching Delight navigate the building's hidden architecture with the confidence of someone who'd been taught by its designer. The orb in her hand pulsed with each correct turn, leading them toward Jenny's pod through routes that avoided every camera, every sensor, every watching eye. He's moved up the timeline, Chun reported, reading Elena's data stream. 3 p.m. termination. Delight stopped so suddenly that Chun nearly ran into her. That's during the shareholders' meeting. He wants an audience, Chun realized. He wants to kill her while accepting her position. The ultimate power move. Murdering the founder while stealing her throne. They reached the quantum membrane that protected Jenny's chamber. But something was wrong. The surface that had been translucent was now almost opaque, crackling with defensive energy that made Chen's equipment scream warnings. He's reinforced it, Delight said, holding the orb up to the barrier. Pulsed frantically, like a heart in panic. He's cutting her off from the network. Inside, barely visible through the darkening membrane, Jenny's pod displayed readings that made Chen's blood freeze. Neural activity dropping. Cardiac rhythm becoming erratic. Oxygen saturation falling below sustainable levels. "She's dying?" Delight whispered, pressing her small hand against the barrier. "Really dying this time." The orb flared, and for a moment, the membrane cleared enough for them to see Jenny's face. Pale, still, but with eyes moving beneath closed lids and patterns that looked like code. "She's trying to tell us something," Delight said, studying the movement. REM patterns, but structured, deliberate. She closed her eyes, counting possibilities the way Jenny had taught her. Binary. She's communicating in binary through her sleep cycles. Chun pulled up his scanner, recording the patterns, running them through decryption protocols. The message that emerged made him step back. Asterisk failsafe compromised. Marcus has quantum key. Trust the light. Asterisk. He has a way to stop the broadcast, Chun translated. He found Jenny's failsafe and built a counter-protocol. But Delight was smiling, that unsettling expression that belonged to someone who'd learned strategy from a genius. No, he found a failsafe, the one Jenny wanted him to find. She held up the orb, which was now displaying patterns within patterns, fractals of light that hurt to perceive directly. She built multiple failsafes, layers within layers, and I'm the only one who knows about all of them. Proximity alert made them both freeze. Security was coming, not the routine patrol but a focused sweep, heading directly for their location. "Elena," Chun sub-vocalized into his comm, "we need a distraction." "Already on it." Elena's voice came back, tight with concentration. "Triggering false breach in Sector 7. That should pull them. Wait. Something's wrong. My access is being revoked. Marcus is." The communication cut off. Chun grabbed Delight's shoulder. "Move. Now." They ran through corridors that shouldn't exist, guided by the orb's increasingly frantic pulses. Behind them, Chun could hear security converging. Not just guards but automated systems, drones that moved through walls, trackers that followed heat signatures through quantum space. "The boardroom," Delight gasped as they climbed through a maintenance shaft that connected impossible floors. "We need to get to the boardroom before the meeting. That'll be the most secure location in the building." "Exactly. Which is why Marcus won't expect us to go there." She paused at an intersection, the orb pulling her left. Jenny hid something there, something even she forgot about until her consciousness expanded through the building. They emerged 3 floors up in a corridor Chun recognized, executive level, where every surface was both decoration and surveillance. His equipment showed 17 different monitoring systems, all focused on this space. "We can't." Delight was already moving, not skulking or hiding but walking with the purposeful stride of someone who belonged. The orb in her hand shifted, its light bending in ways that made cameras see what they expected to see. A cleaning drone, a scheduled maintenance check, anything but a child and a security chief committing corporate treason. They reached the boardroom doors, which stood open for pre-meeting preparation. Inside, workers were arranging chairs, testing holographic projectors, ensuring every surface gleamed with the kind of perfection that cost more than most people's annual salaries. "Excuse me," Delight said to the nearest worker, her voice carrying that particular tone of entitled confidence that wealthy children learned from birth. "My aunt is on the board. She left her medication in her usual seat. May I retrieve it?" The worker barely looked up. "Be quick." Delight moved to seat 7, Jenny's traditional place, now marked with a memorial plaque that made her stomach turn. She pressed the orb against the chair's base, and something clicked. Not audibly but quantum-mechanically, a lock that existed in probability rather than metal. A panel opened that hadn't been there a second before, revealing a device that looked like the orb's older, angrier sibling. It was darker, denser, and hummed with the kind of energy that suggested consequences. "The original prototype," Chun breathed, recognizing it from Jenny's earliest patents. "The consciousness anchor. She built this before she understood the full implications. And hid it where Marcus would never look," Delight said, carefully lifting the device. "In the chair he's about to sit in to accept her position." An alarm pierced the air, not security but medical. Every screen in the building suddenly displayed the same alert. Critical life support failure. Pod 7. Sublevel 12. Jenny's pod. Marcus had accelerated the timeline again. We're out of time, Chin said. No, Delight corrected, holding both orbs now. One in each hand, light and dark, possibility and certainty. We're exactly on time. Jenny knew Marcus would do this. She counted on his impatience, his need to win definitively. She looked up at Chen, and her young face carried the weight of understanding too heavy for her years. She turned herself into bait, and Marcus just took it. The building shuddered. Not physically but informationally. Every system fluctuating as Jenny's consciousness began its final dispersal. Throughout Omnicorp Tower, lights flickered in patterns that looked like farewells. The meeting's in 90 minutes, Chun said, checking his tactical display. Security's converging on the pod chamber. Elena's been detained. Half our allies are being questioned. And Jenny is dying, Delight finished. But not dead. Not yet. And the difference between dying and dead is where miracles live. She held up both orbs, and they began to resonate with each other, creating harmonics that made reality seem negotiable. Jenny taught me that consciousness isn't singular, she said, moving toward the boardroom's main presentation interface. It's distributed, quantum, existing in multiple states simultaneously until observed. She placed both orbs on the interface, and the room's holographic projectors came alive with possibilities. So we're going to give Marcus exactly what he wants. Jenny Smart's death, broadcast live to the world. Chun understood suddenly, the plan clicking into place with military precision. But observation changes the outcome. And who better to observe? Delight said, her smile now matching Jenny's distributed consciousness in its certainty. Then everyone everywhere all at once? The countdown to the shareholders' meeting continued, each second bringing them closer to either triumph or catastrophe. In her pod, Jenny Smart's body was failing, each breath potentially her last. In his office, Marcus Thorne was preparing for his coronation. Throughout the building, security was tightening like a noose. But in a boardroom that had hosted 1,000 corporate victories and defeats, a child and a soldier were preparing to flip the entire game board. Because Jenny Smart had taught them both the same lesson. The best time to strike wasn't when you were winning. It was when your enemy thought they'd already won. The orbs pulsed in unison, counting down to a moment that would either save a visionary or bury her forever. 87 minutes and counting. The arrest of Marcus Thorne played on every screen in the civilized world. Not the polished, choreographed surrender of white-collar criminals who knew their lawyers would have them home for dinner, but something rawer. A man being dragged from Omnicorp Tower while screaming about consciousness transfer and quantum betrayal. His perfect composure shattered into fragments that would become memes before the sun set. Prometheus Syndicate exposed, scrolled across news feeds in 17 languages. Catherine Morse's exclusive footage, a child with 2 glowing orbs revealing the attempted murder of the century's greatest innovator, had already been viewed 4 billion times. The comments sections had become their own ecosystem of disbelief, vindication, and the kind of public rage that toppled corporations. But Delight Rollins wasn't watching any of it. She sat in the medical wing's waiting room, the orbs quiet in her lap, their purpose fulfilled but their presence still comforting. Through the reinforced glass, she could see Jenny Smart. Really see her, not as distributed consciousness or quantum possibility, but as a person. Fragile, breathing, real. She's stable, Dr. Sarah Winters said, emerging from the treatment room with the kind of exhaustion that came from performing medical miracles on deadline. The consciousness reintegration is unprecedented. Her neural patterns show signs of expansion we don't have words for yet. But she's Jenny. She's herself. Just more. Can I see her? Sarah's expression softened. She's been asking for you since she woke up. But Delight, she's different now. The experience changed her in ways we're still trying to understand. Delight stood, the orbs warm against her palms. She taught me that change isn't something to fear. It's something to navigate. The room they'd given Jenny faced east, catching the morning light that painted everything in shades of possibility. She sat propped against pillows that probably cost more than most people's rent. But her attention was entirely on the window, watching the city wake up as if seeing it for the first time. "The lights," she said without turning, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "I can see all of them now. Every spectrum, every frequency. The ones people see and the ones they don't." She turned, and her eyes, still brown, still human, but somehow deeper, found Delight. "You saved me." "You saved yourself," Delight corrected, approaching the bed with the careful steps of someone entering a cathedral. "You built the tools, left the clues, trusted the right people. I just followed the lights." Jenny's laugh was the same, that unexpected sound that had first made Delight believe a CEO could be human. "Come here, my dear one." The hug was careful. Jenny's body was still recovering from existing between states, but it carried the weight of everything. Gratitude, love, the recognition between two people who'd seen reality from angles others couldn't imagine. "I watched," Jenny said quietly. "Even distributed, even fragmenting. I watched you stand in that boardroom and refuse to let them believe their comfortable lie. Do you know how much courage that took?" "I was terrified," Delight admitted. "Good. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." Jenny pulled back, studying Delight's face with that intensity that made people either revolutionize industries or run away. "I want to offer you something. Not charity, not pity, but recognition. A full scholarship to any school you choose. Mentorship, not just from me but from the brightest minds I know. A future limited only by your imagination." Delight's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. "You don't owe me. I owe you everything. But more than that, the world owes itself the chance to see what you become." Jenny touched the orbs that Delight still carried. "These were prototypes. Version 1 of something I never finished. I want you to help me design version 2. Not weapons, not corporate tools, but something better. Devices that help people see the lights that matter." Through the window, they could see federal vehicles surrounding Prometheus Syndicate's headquarters 14 blocks away. Victoria Ash was being arrested on live television, her empire collapsing in real time as 40 years of corporate murders were exposed. The conspiracy had been vast, 17 companies hollowed out, their founders mysteriously dead, their innovations absorbed into Prometheus's portfolio. But it was over now. The pattern was broken. "Marcus's trial starts next week," David Chun said from the doorway, his presence both protective and respectful. "Federal prosecutors say they have enough evidence for 400 years of sentences. The Prometheus board is turning on each other, trying to claim ignorance. It's—" He paused, searching for words. "Comprehensive justice." Jenny nodded, but her expression carried no satisfaction. Marcus was brilliant. If he'd used that brilliance to build instead of steal, to create instead of destroy. She shook her head. Waste. Such terrible waste. Over the following weeks, Omnicorp transformed. Not the surface transformation of corporate restructuring, but something deeper. Jenny implemented what she called constellation protocols, systems of transparency and accountability that made betrayal from within nearly impossible. Every major decision required quantum verification from multiple sources. Every financial transaction left traces that couldn't be erased. Every employee, from janitors to board members, had channels to report concerns that bypassed traditional hierarchy. David Chun became Chief Security Architect, a position Jenny created specifically for him. His first initiative was the Delight Protocol, a system that flagged whenever someone without traditional power tried to raise concerns, ensuring their voices couldn't be dismissed or buried. Elena Rodriguez was promoted to Chief of Strategic Operations, her ghost protocols becoming official systems for protecting whistleblowers and truth-tellers. The others, Sarah Winters, James Park, Lisa Chun, Catherine Morse, each found their roles in the new Omnicorp, an organization that had learned the hard way that ethical infrastructure was as important as technological innovation. But the most visible change was the establishment of the Light Seekers Initiative. Named for Delight's insistence that some lights were only visible to those willing to look, It was a global program that identified children with unusual perspectives, unconventional intelligence, the kind of minds that saw between things. Not to exploit them, but to nurture them, to teach them what Jenny had taught Delight, that perception could be cultivated, that reality was bigger than most people imagined, that the impossible was just a puzzle waiting for the right perspective. 6 months after her resurrection, Jenny stood at a podium not unlike the one where Marcus had tried to steal her empire. But this time, the audience wasn't shareholders or board members. It was children, hundreds of them, from every economic background, every corner of the globe that Omnicorp's influence touched. "The future," she said, her voice carrying both its old warmth and its new harmonics, "belongs to those who can see lights others miss, who ask questions others don't think to ask, who refuse to accept that something is impossible just because adults have agreed to call it that." She found Delight in the crowd. Not in the audience but on stage, her co-presenter, her protégé, her reminder that salvation sometimes came in unexpected packages. "My friend Delight taught me something," Jenny continued. "She taught me that being nobody can be a superpower, because nobody is watched less carefully. Nobody is underestimated. Nobody can go anywhere, do anything, save anyone." Delight stepped forward, no longer the scared child who disrupted a funeral, but not yet the revolutionary she would become. She was something in between, something becoming. "Every person in this room has a light inside them," Delight said, her young voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been believed when it mattered most. "A light that shows truth when everyone else sees lies. That reveals possibility when everyone else sees limitation. That exposes justice when everyone else accepts corruption." She held up the new orb version 2, designed by her and Jenny together. It was smaller, clearer, and when activated, it didn't just respond to consciousness. It amplified it, helping young minds see the quantum possibilities that existed in every moment. "This is yours," she said to the assembled children. "Not the device, though you'll each receive one, but the ability to see beyond what you're told is real. To question, to investigate, to insist on truth even when powerful people want you to accept comfortable lies." The presentation continued, but the message was already spreading, viral in the way that hope always was when properly cultivated. Within hours, #Lightseekers was trending globally. Applications for the program crashed servers in 12 countries. And in boardrooms around the world, executives who'd built their empires on buried truths felt the first stirrings of unease. Because Jenny Smart hadn't just survived her attempted murder. She turned it into a teaching moment for the entire world. And Delight Rollins, the nobody from nowhere, had become proof that the smallest voice could create the biggest change. In federal prison, Marcus Thorne watched the broadcast from his cell. His hands clenched so tight his manicured nails drew blood. He'd been sentenced to 97 years, barely a quarter of what prosecutors wanted, but more than enough to ensure he'd die in custody. The Prometheus Syndicate had abandoned him immediately, their lawyers claiming he'd been a rogue agent, acting without authorization. But what burned worst wasn't the imprisonment or the betrayal. It was watching that child, that nobody, standing where he should have stood, reshaping the world he'd tried to steal. The guard shut off the television. "Lights out, Thorne." In the darkness, Marcus planned and plotted and raged. But it didn't matter. The future had already moved past him, carried forward by people who understood that power wasn't about controlling the board. It was about recognizing that everyone, even an 11-year-old girl with an impossible orb, had the potential to flip it entirely. A year later, at the first Lightseekers Global Summit, Jenny Smart would say something that would be quoted in history books, painted on walls, coded into the foundation of technologies that hadn't been invented yet. "The light that saved my life wasn't advanced technology or corporate power or adult wisdom. It was a child's refusal to accept that death was final when life was still fighting." Never underestimate the power of someone who sees what you've trained yourself to ignore. But that was still to come. For now, in a medical room that faced the sunrise, a genius and a girl sat together, designing futures that Marcus Thorne had tried to kill, proving that some lights, once lit, could never be extinguished. They just needed someone brave enough to insist they were there.